Today we are going into the dungeons again, this time in Erune. This here is an app-driven game where you and your fellow adventurers venture out into, well, more or less dangerous situation. Here you will fight monsters, you will go into dungeons, and you will explore this world. In this video I am going to show you how to set up the game, but also how to play it. At the start of your game, you need to go into the app. And in the app, you first need to choose which game mode you would like to play. Because there are 3 different game modes. You can play the Master of Shadows, you can play solo or co-op, or you can play the arena mode. The one I'm going to show you in this video here is the Master of Shadows. Here, some players portray as the adventurers, while one other player portrays as the Master of Shadows. The Master of Shadows will control the enemies and the building of the dungeons and so on, and will be kind of like the Dungeon Master. Once we have chosen which mode we would like to play, it's time for us to choose which quest we are doing. And then we need to add which of the adventures that are a part of this quest. The player that is the Master of Shadows needs to use the quest book. In here you will find how the tiles will be placed. Now, I won't show you what's in this book, as I do not want to spoil the game for you. So I will just do an example. This here is an example of what the first tiles in the game could look like. This up here is the starting tile. The player that plays the Master of Shadows will have this setup in front of them. The quest book facing the Master of Shadows. The Pact with Shadows boards facing the other players. We will have some enemy cards, some mastered skills, and also some shadow cards. In between the Pact with Shadows and the quest book, we will also have this player screen, blocking any of the other players from looking at the quest book. And the adventurers will of course also need to set up their play area. First we need to choose what we want to be. In this case, a wizard. Here we will have a little picture showing what the wizard looks like, so we know which miniature we should pick. We have a little text describing the wizard, and below that we have some player characteristics. We can see how much health we start with. We can also see how much mana we have, plus our maximum stamina. But with the stamina we don't have anything at the start of the game. This one should be empty, and then we can fill it up during our game. And we also need to take this player sheet here. This here will be our character. Here we will write down any items that we might get during our travels, how much money we have, what level we are, and so on. This paper here is pretty much who we are. If we have any skills, we also take the skill cards, and if we have any spells, we also need to take the spell cards. Now, let's take a look at this before we start to look at the gameplay. So this here is your character sheet. As I said before, here you can see your life. If your life runs out, well, then you die. But you can make a pact with the shadows to get back again. I will show you how to do that in a bit. The stamina here is where you will place your gained stamina during a quest. Now, at the start, this will be empty. But as you will roll die during the game, you will get stamina. And you will place those tokens here. But you can never have more than your max. And the same goes for your health and your mana. But your mana will of course be filled up at the start of the game. So will your health. Your mana is used to cast spells. Like this one here, for example. If you want to cast a fireball, well, it will cost you 1 mana. You can only cast 1 of these per quest, meaning that the fireball will be able to be used once. as will this one and this one here. You can never use one twice. Down here you can see your attack rolls, meaning how many attack die you get to roll during your attack. We all start with 1, but as you get more weapons, these will be modified. And the defense works pretty much the same way. We all start with 1 defense die, but as you get more weapons, these will be modified. Down here we have our potions and runes, and you can have a maximum of 2. Unless you have the potion belt, because then your maximum will raise up to 6. Any potions or runes that you have will be written here. Over here you have equipment and artifacts. You will write down here whatever you have and what it will give you, because just as the other equipment, these can give you extra benefits during your game. Up here we have something that says fate points. Now at the start of the game you have 1 fate point, and these fate points can be used to resurrect your adventure if you die. Here we have your movement roll, meaning how much modifier you have when you roll the movement die, looking like this. At the start of the game we all have a +4 movement roll, but this will of course be modified as we get more equipment. Here you will write down the level of your character, and here you will write down your experience points. Now as you gain new levels, you will also change your stats. On your little character card here, you can also see that you have some more actions that you can use. Over here on these cards here, you can see what you are. In this case, a wizard. You see your stats, but down here you can also see that you have some more abilities. These abilities can of course also be used during your turn, as you can with the skill cards. The skill cards are quite important and will add, well, better skills to your character. These here are the basic skill cards. But eventually you will be able to get more advanced skills. But these skills will cost you stamina to be able to use. So once we have all set up our play areas here and the Master of Shadows have set up the starting tiles, according to the quest book, well, we are ready to start playing. Each turn of Erune is played out during 3 different phases. The first phase is the Spirit of Erune phase, and this is where we simply tell the app that a new turn begins. And now something will happen. This is kind of like the event phase, and this can be anything from, well, stones falling down and hitting your adventurers in the head, giving them damage, or simply just spawning enemies and so on. Now the Spirit of Erune phase goes quite fast, and the next phase will be the Master of Shadows phase. The Master of Shadows in this game is kind of like the Dungeon Master, and they are the ones that have the quest book, and they are the only ones that can look in this book. Now the adventurers out on the board knows that there might be a room in there that they can explore. They know that there might be a wardrobe, a chest or something that they can explore. But the Master of Shadows knows a little bit more, because they see the full map in here and they know what the adventurers actually can do. And when the adventurers does something, they will tell this to the app. So for example, if the warrior searches the wardrobe, well then the Master of Shadows will tell the app that the warrior searches the wardrobe. And you need to tell the app who does what, because of course the app cannot know this on their own. Once you have done this, the app will give you a result. What you have found, or maybe an enemy pops out, maybe there's a door behind the wardrobe, and so on. And the story will evolve from there. But the Master of Shadows is also the player that will control the enemies. So the Master of Shadows would need to move the rats, in this case, according to this card. As we can see on this card, we can see the amount of health, experience, but also movement points that these enemies has. Here we can see which die they get to roll when they attack and how many, but also what defense they have. In this case, 0. That means that in this case here, for example, the Master of Shadows could move this little rat all the way over here and attack the wizard. But the other rats would also be able to reach their destination and all give damage to the wizard. So the enemy's stats can be seen up here. But if we look at the bottom, we can see that we can also see which size this enemy is, but also that it actually has a special attack. In this case here, a group attack. So once the Master of Shadows have moved the enemies, well, they can also attack, if they are within range and if they have line of sight. Now we would again need to look at the card to see how many attack die each enemy gets to roll. In this case it is 1 die, meaning one of these die. If you get the skull result, well then you actually get to attack. If you get the lightning result, well then you get 1 stamina instead that you can use in a future turn. If you get the shield, well nothing happens when you attack. But when you do defense, of course, this will block 1 damage. But if we look at the rat's cards, we can see that they actually have a special attack as well. This is a group attack. This means that they could use the group attack, spending 1 stamina to activate the attack, and then doing the attack on their enemy. When the adventurers are attacked, they get the chance to defend themselves by rolling the same amount of defense die as their character sheet says. Maybe they only have 1 die because we have just started the journey. But if you have gear or shields or whatever you have, you might be able to roll more die. For every shield result that you get, you block damage. If your adventure would die, meaning that you lose all of your life points, well then you simply lie your character down, taking up 2 squares out on the board. The other characters can still cross these 2 squares, but they cannot stop on them. If they would have any shadow cards with stamina on them, these will go back to the Master of Shadows. If they would have any stamina on their character card, well those would be lost as well. Now, the dead adventurer would have 4 different choices. Either if they have an item that can resurrect them, they can use them now. Or they can wait for a fellow adventurer to use a spell to resurrect them. If they can't do any of this, they could use 1 fate point to recover all of their health and get back into action. But if they don't have any fate points either, well, they probably need to do a pact with the Master of Shadows. So this here is the pact board. Here you can make pacts with the Master of Shadows. The first one here is hidden resources. Here you can make a pact with the Master of Shadows to recover 2 health or 1 mana. If you do this, you would need to take 1 shadow card, stated up here. The second pact would be the purification. Here you can lift a permanent curse, and the Master of Shadows cannot use this curse anymore during this quest. This would cost you 2 shadow cards. The last pact is the resurrection. Here the player would get to resurrect their character and gain all the health that they have lost. But now they would need to take 3 shadow cards. When you get these shadow cards, well, you place them in front of you. And now every stamina you get in the future needs to be placed on these cards. When you have put 3 staminas on the shadow card, well, that card is now filled, and it will go to the Master of Shadows. And this is the way you need to keep on filling up the shadow cards until you eventually get rid of them and can start to fill up your own stamina reserve again. And that was the Master of Shadows' turn, to move and activate the enemies. But the Master of Shadows' job just doesn't end here, because they need to keep an eye on what is going on the board as well, remember? Because if the adventurers are searching a wardrobe or interacting with anything else out on the map, maybe they open a door, well then the Master of Shadows need to keep an eye on the quest book to be able to put out new tiles, but also tell the app what is going on. So once the Master of Shadows have done their turn, the turn goes over to the adventurers. And now they get to do up to 2 basic actions. Some of these actions can be done more than once, for example searching. But some of these basic actions can only be done once per turn. For example, moving and attacking. But let's take a look at what you can do during your turn. So to be able to move your character, we first need to know how many steps your character can move. To do that, we first need to look at your movement roll plus value. In this case, +4. So we take that value and then we roll the movement die to see what extra value we have. So in this case here we got 2. 2 + 4 = 6. Meaning that the wizard can now move 6 steps. And then you simply move your characters that amount of steps. Or until you simply do not want to move any longer. Your character can move horizontal or vertical, and some characters can also move diagonal, but in that case it will state on their character card. You cannot, of course, move through walls or any other obstacles out on the board. Plus, you cannot stop on a square that is already occupied by an enemy, another character, or an object. Now, when you move your character out on the board, it's also important to keep in mind in which direction you finish with your character once your movements have stopped. Because your direction that you are looking will be your line of sight. And this is what you will be using when you are either attacking or doing defense. Because if you are attacking, well, you need to have a line of sight to whatever you are attacking. Meaning that you need to be able to draw a straight line from you to your opponent. So in this example here, for example, this warlock would have line of sight of this enemy, as there's nothing in between them and they are straight forward. But your line of sight actually goes to your back sides as well. Meaning that you will be able to see this enemy as well, and also attack them. And since the table here is lower than your character, you will be able to have line of sight and attack this character as well. But if another enemy would have been behind you here, you would not have been able to attack that enemy, since you are facing in the other direction. To be able to open the door, you simply move over the door's threshold and flip the token over. Now you have revealed a new room. So when you move over the threshold and open the door, you also reveal a new room. And this is where the Master of Shadows will put out the new tiles and everything that's in the room, including the enemies or furniture or whatever there might be in there. And then the adventure's turns goes on. But when you go into a new space, you can also choose to search that area for any traps. Meaning that in this way, you might be able to detect the traps before you just walk into them. To do that, you need to roll this die. And if you get any eye results, you would be able to detect traps. If there would have been 2 traps in this room, well, both traps would be shown because you rolled 2 eyes. But if you only roll 1 eye, you would only detect 1 of the 2 traps. And then the trap closest to the adventurers would be revealed, but the one further away would still be hidden. And once per turn, you can also try to disarm a trap. And you would do that by using the same die. To do that, you would need to stand next to the trap and then roll the die. If you roll the little cogwheel here, well then the trap is disarmed and you are safe. But if you do not roll any of the cogwheel and only get the eyes, well then you would need to tell the app that the trap has been triggered. And then the app will probably harm you in some horrific way. But if you manage to disarm the trap, you will actually get 2 experience points. Disarming a trap is considered to be a free action. And monsters also becomes active once you have line of sight to the tile that they are standing on. Meaning that if you cannot see the tile where the enemies are standing on, well then they're not active. Which makes sense, right? Because they can't see you, you can't see them, you don't know that they're there. But once you get in line of sight of that tile where the enemy is, and you can see the tile, well then the enemies on that tile will activate. Besides moving on your turn, you can of course also search objects in room. For example, this wardroom. Then you would simply take your adventure, move up to the object you would like to search, and then tell the app that your warrior, in this case, searches the wardrobe, or whatever it is that you search. Now the app will tell you what you find. Once you have searched this, you simply flip the token over, indicating that this is not an active object anymore. Before you go into battle, you can also choose to prepare for battle. This will give you a temporary stamina that you can use during your next attack, but you need to use it during the next attack, otherwise it will go away. But you can also choose to rest in front of the campfire, and you can do this once per quest. This is a good way to maybe drink some potions, get some more powers, but you can also use this to gain level. So if you have a character that has enough experience to gain a new level, well maybe sit down next to the campfire, take a little break, and get all the benefits before you keep on moving in your quest is a good idea. And then you can of course also choose to attack your opponent. Now, like I told you before, this all depends on which way your character is facing. Because your attack zone is the 2 squares to your side and the 1 square to your front. Some characters can also attack diagonal, but then that will be a special effect that you have on your cards or your character sheets. When you are defending, it would be all of the 5 squares in front of you and to your sides. So in this case here, the warrior would be able to attack this skeleton archer, but it would not be able to attack to its back sides as they just cannot reach them and they're not in their attack zone. In this game, there are 4 different attack die, and depending on which weapon you have, you will be rolling different dice. The black one is the basic one, and this is the one we will start with. Before we attack, we of course also need to make sure that we are within range. Because if you only have melee weapons, well then you need to be adjacent to your opponent. But if you have ranged weapons, well then you can be further away and attack from distance, as long as you have line of sight. To attack, you simply take the attack die that you have, in this case the black one, and then you roll it. If you get a shield, well then you missed. If you get the lightning bolt, you get 1 stamina. And if you get the skull, well then you hit. If the enemy cannot defend that hit value, because on the enemy's cards they also have the defense value. In this case here, the skeleton get to roll 1 defense die and they already have 1 shield. And you can of course also do ranged attacks, but again you need to be facing your opponent, or at least be within your arc of fire. If any enemies are standing behind you, you will not be able to fire at them. And again, if they are standing behind a wall, well you cannot see them, so you cannot hit them. But you can however fire over furnitures that are lower than you. In this case here, the warlock can see over the table, meaning that they can hit the skeleton. Now if the warlock would like to attack the rat over here, well they would not be able to do that, even though they are facing in that direction, because there is a wall in between the warlock and the rat, meaning that they do not have line of sight to their target. Now if you make a ranged attack, but you do not manage to get any skulls, well, that will be a stray shot, meaning that you have failed your ranged attack. And for each lightning ball that you roll instead of the skull, you will now need to do lightning damage to the first character that is in your way, ally or enemy, meaning that now you might actually damage your friend. And now this character needs to do a lightning defense roll to defend themselves. Lightning damage is a special type of damage, inflicted by either spells or reaction skills. For each shield you roll, well, then you block out 1 lightning damage. For every shield that you do not roll, well, then you need to take damage. And during your turn, you can of course also use an action to cast a spell, either to attack an enemy or maybe heal a friend. To do this, you will need to have the spells next to you, and they need to be not used during this turn. Then you need to pay the amount of mana stated on the spells. Once you have used the spell, you take this mana token and put it on that spell, indicating that now you cannot use this spell anymore during this quest. But you actually do not need to use your weapons to attack, because if you are standing next to a wardrobe, you can choose to flip over that wardrobe and knock it over on the opponents standing on the adjacent 4 squares. Now these enemies needs to defend against 2 yellow die. If you get any lightning balls during this roll, well, you will not get any stamina. And once the wardrobe has been knocked over, it is destroyed and removed from the board. When you move your characters around in this world, sooner or later you are going to end up on a trap. And this is where the Master of Shadows need to keep a track. Because if the Avengers ever ends up on a trap, the Master of Shadows needs to tell the Adventurers to stop their movement immediately. And now, the Master of Shadows will need to tell the app that an adventurer has stepped into a trap. And the app will now say what will happen to the adventurer that stepped on the trap. Other free actions you can do during your turn is to, for example, drink a potion, maybe to heal up, or use a rune, or take any other substance that you might have in your inventory. And this is quite important to remember to use them, because that can be the difference between making a quest or ending up on the floor. Every now and then you will also find Erune events, and you can trigger these events. When you do this, well, you will tell the app that your adventurer, in this case the Warlock, have triggered an Erune event. And then the app will tell you what happens. This here is a free action. And that's what you can do during your turn. First we have the Erune phase, where the app will give us an event. Then we have the Master of Shadows phase, where the Master of Shadows will move the enemies out on the board, attacking and whatever they want to do. Then we have the Adventurer's turn, where they go out and search different objects, open doors, attack enemies, interact with objects, and so on. And this is the way the game would go on until we have either failed the quest or we have completed the quest. If we manage to complete the quest, well, again, the app will tell us what happens, how much experience points we got, how good we were, and so on. And we will write down all of that information on our character sheets. But if we did not manage to complete the quest, well, again, the app will tell us what happens. But then it won't be that beneficial for us. So what I have shown you here is the Master of Shadows mode. But you also have a mode that is the solo or co-op mode. In that case, the app will do most of the work for you, but the players will need to control the monsters. And there is an AI sheet in the rulebook stating how the monsters will move. They will of course go to the closest victim that they can attack, and then they will simply attack that character. Again, you would just look at these cards to see what type of damage that they do, and then try to defend yourself. It's not that big a difference from what I just showed you. The biggest difference is that here you have an AI controlling the monsters instead of an actual human. And the last mode would be the arena mode. Here the heroes simply goes into an arena, fighting off monster waves and getting unique rewards. And this is a great way to advance your character. So maybe between quests, well, do a little arena mode. Go in there and just slay waves of monsters to really pump up your character. And you can do this as well with a Master of Shadow or in the solo or co-op mode. There you have it, my friend. That was how you play Erune, which is a nice little dungeon crawler game. If you have played dungeon crawlers before, well, you will figure this game out quite fast. If you are new to dungeon crawlers, it is not too hard to get into this game either. And the app is quite user-friendly, and it will help you through the gameplay without taking away too much from the actual game. Because I think that some apps do just that. They kind of ruin the experience, but here it's just enough for you to keep your interest and thinking that the app actually helps you and don't ruin your gameplay by taking away too much. If you're into dungeon crawlers, I think you will enjoy Erune, and if you have not played dungeon crawlers before, well, I think this is a great place to start. If you like my video here, well, why not subscribe to the channel, give me a like, a comment, or whatever. But most important, my friend, please, as usual, keep on remembering to spreading that board gaming love I know you all have. Peace out, my friend.